Welcome back, people of internet. We are happy to bring in a new episode where we happen to cover the Zoom Camera fair that happened in Thailand, where we had the opportunity to use our memory cards to insert into all our favorite cameras and shoot footages and to analyze which camera will be best and which camera will be going into our camera bag. So stay tuned for the footages from those cameras. But I know which are my favorite cameras. I'm keen on one specific camera which I laid my eyes on, and I'm thinking of buying it for its one specific reason, that is its high image stabilization. Panasonic G9ii is extraordinary in its image stabilization, while Nikon Z8 has excellent rolling shutter capability. So I'm conflicted which one to go. The best choice for me is to choose Panasonic G9 Mark II because it is lightweight, it is completely weather sealed, it has amazing image stabilization, it has very good autofocus. That is new this year, and I'm highly positive about it because I have tested it. The footage coming out right now. After watching these footages, we will get to the end part where I conclude what I have actually got from the fair. Stay tuned. The footage that you're watching is from Panasonic Lumix G9ii with 12 to 60mm f2.8 to f4 in 4K DCI mode. It is recorded in 24 frames per second. You can look at the stabilization, you can look at vlog footage, you can look at the color grading that can be applied to it if it is overexposed or underexposed. You can see how it changes. This camera will be my camera in the future because of its amazing handheld image stabilization capability. There is a manageable amount of rolling shutter existing in this camera. My main concern about any video camera is the rolling shutter and the stabilization, and so this camera, even though it has a decent amount of rolling shutter, I think the stabilization is the killing point for me to buy this camera. And so yes, I am so impressed for Panasonic to release such an amazing video camera, which is also a very good photo camera, and so it is perfect for a hybrid shooter like me. In G9 Mark II, the autofocus is just excellent. I would say it is on par with Sony cameras. It locked onto the eyes very fast, and also it did not lose the autofocus from the subject. The eye autofocus works flawlessly. As you can see in this footage, G9ii is combined with 42.5mm f1.2 lens, and the footage that I got out of this combination is just amazing. Introducing our heavyweight champion here from the Fujifilm booth, that is GFX100 Mark II Mega version. This camera performs really well with 50mm f1.4 lens, which is fantastic. The photos that we get out of it is amazingly sharp, crystal clear, and it is plenty of details. The footage itself looks very sharp, but autofocus is lackluster. It was fun to play with, but this camera is not for me. This footage is proxy of 8K 60 frames per second, which then transitions to 8K 60 frames per second shot using Z9 with 24 to 70mm f2.8. This was shot internally in Z9. That was amazing. The quality that we got was exceptional. The raw footage was actually darker, and then I had to grade a bit to make it brighter for the proper exposure. I am extremely glad that Zoom Camera allowed me to carry this expensive camera gear and test out to my heart's content. Since Z9 was using an older firmware, the autofocus was not that accurate, but the stabilization was really good, and I'm really glad that I was able to see the 8K 60 frames per second footage. I'm glad that I was able to see how well my computer handles the 8K 60 frames per second raw footage, and I think it handles really well. It had been a sample of what kind of images I can expect out of this camera shooting wildlife at the field.
The bokeh and autofocus looks fantastic. The stabilization, as you can see, I'm just normally waving my camera around, and it's really good. When it nails autofocus, it's just mind-blowing. It's a bit slow compared to even Z8.
But that was because it was using one of the older firmware. Once the firmware was updated, everything worked fine. Now you're watching 8K 60 frames per second from Z8 with 50mm f1.2 lens. It has really good autofocus, but at this point of the video, the subject was closer than the minimum focusing distance, so it got all blurry. But then when I moved back a bit, I was able to focus back again. What my wife is actually showing is the price of the camera, which is huge. But the perks when you buy this kind of a huge camera is, number one, there is no rolling shutter at all, as you can see in the video. The autofocus is fantastic, even though for photos the eye autofocus doesn't work as accurately, but for the videos you will definitely get away with it. The stabilization is decent. It's not mind-blowing as compared to Panasonic G9ii, but otherwise it works really great. I'm so impressed by the 4K and 8K footages that I get out of this camera. And finally, Sony A7CII. I tested this camera with 50mm f1.2 lens because that's what I have, and so I wanted to see how well it performed when it comes to stabilization when shooting 4K 60 frames per second and eye autofocus, and it was fantastic. The footage is excellent, the slow motion is amazing, the quality is impressive, stabilization is decent, but there was one flaw with it. It overheated within 2 minutes of recording the footage and it was warm to my touch. For me, it's a no-go, and so I will be using that, if at all I buy in the future, only for photos. On the other hand, ZV-E1, since it's using the similar kind of body compared to ZV-E10, I think that will overheat as well. I am not comfortable going with ZV-E1 as well. I also tried A7C Mark II with 10 to 20mm f4 APS-C lens. When I mounted that lens on this camera, it automatically switches to APS-C mode. The footage that you're seeing right now is the wide-angle lens mounted on Sony A7C Mark II, and the footage looks good. Everything is in focus because it is almost f6 when you convert the aperture to full frame. This is what you would get. Even though the footage is really nice, the stabilization is really bad, as you can see in the video. It looks like the stabilization is non-existent. I'm not that comfortable using this camera for video at all. As we have analyzed all the footages that we collected from the fair, we have seen a lot of compromises happening in certain areas. For example, in Z8 it is too expensive and it is heavy and bulky to carry. Even though the autofocus is good, the autofocus is not the best. Sony is still leading the eye autofocus competition when it comes to photos. But for videos, you still can get away with Nikon. As I said earlier in the video, Panasonic G9 Mark II, in my opinion, is the best value for money because it has very highly improved autofocus, excellent image stabilization. The only downside for it is the micro four thirds sensor. If you need high low light capability, that sensor is not gonna do it, and it's rolling shutter. Rolling shutter is there and it is noticeable, but if you manage to shoot it in a way that you minimize the rolling shutter, I think you can get away with the footages. But otherwise, I think G9 Mark II is the best compromise. Even though G9 Mark II seems to be the best option, I did not buy G9 Mark II at the fair. The reason being, it is higher than my budget right now. I feel the best camera right now for the budget is Sony FX30 cinema camera. My reasons are these. Even though it does not have the excellent stabilization, it has got everything else. It is lightweight, it's weather sealed, it has really good capability for autofocus, it has bigger sensors, perform much better in low light, and it can shoot photos as well. Believe me, I have used this for the past week and I have taken a lot of photos which are just amazing. The continuous autofocus in photo mode is more than sufficient for me to take any moving subject photo. But you cannot spray and pray. That's the only downfall, but otherwise this is the best I can buy. And why didn't I go with A6700? It's more or less the same, or rather it's more advanced when it comes to autofocus and other AI processing capability. I used A7C Mark II and A6700, both at the fair, and I felt that even when recording 4K 60 frames per second, for 2 minutes, both those bodies got overheated, which I don't like. I cannot have an overheated body in hand while shooting videos when traveling. Even though people would say that you're not going to shoot more than like 2 minutes in hand. Who knows? Who knows what situation demands? I have been in a situation where I had to film for more than 2 minutes, and so if 2 minutes is the overheat limit for any bodies, I don't want to use that for any of my work at all, because I'll be in a constant paranoid mode. I may happen to miss the moment, which I don't want to do. So for these reasons, I didn't go for any other camera apart from this, because at this price range, FX30 has got the best body and the best compromise for me. Thank you for watching the video. Peace.